Good morning and welcome to the August 2nd edition of the Board of County Commissioners regular meeting at Harris Hall. Welcome everyone in-house to our in-person meetings. We're fully assembled today. The first thing on our agenda, Mr. Mokrahajski, is in fact adjustments to the agenda. Do we have any?
We do not.
To the board? I see none. Moving right along, any emergency business today?
No.
The board, we have no emergency business, then we'll move directly into public comments. For public comments, we allow 3 minutes at the microphone. You will not be warned when it comes close to 3 minutes, so keep an eye on your own watch, or if you're in a house on the screen, it'll click down to 3 minutes, at which time the mic will be silenced and we'll move along to the next speaker. If you wish to provide written testimony to the Board of County Commissioners, please provide it 1 week in advance of the scheduled meeting. So if you would turn it in last Thursday, it could be considered for public record for today's meeting. So with that, Ms. Jones is in the air and will entertain public comment from those in-house first, followed by anyone who happens to be online for public comment. So first on our list today, we have Nicole Nelson, followed by Amy Newport. Ms. Nelson, would you step to the mic, identify yourself, and proceed?
Good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Barr. My name is Nicole Nelson, and I have been a resident of Lane County since 2010. I am here on behalf of the Springfield Community Development Corporation, which has been working on the research and planning of a multi-use sports facility for the past 4 years. A few of my board members are here with me today. The Springfield Community Development Corporation believes a thoughtfully located, right-sized, multi-use venue welcoming residents and visitors alike will positively transform our community through long-term economic gains and healthier, more engaged citizens. The proposed facility will serve for a multitude of solve for a multitude of problems the community is facing, including filling room nights for our hoteliers during the winter months, providing a lack of facilities, we have a lack of facilities for tournament events and economic development dollars into our community. And lastly, it'll provide a place to promote and encourage physical activity to community members of all age levels. As a metro area, we do not have enough covered sports space to accommodate our youth during the winter months. The indoor controlled environment allows for year-round use and event hosting. An innovative hydraulic track, which can be raised and lowered flat to the floor, offers ideal flexibility to regularly accommodate a wide range of sports, including indoor track and field, basketball, volleyball, wrestling, gymnastics, martial arts, weightlifting, pickleball, badminton, archery, and even more. The proposed Springfield Indoor Track, Sports and Events Center envisions other non-sporting events such as cultural events, civic events, trade shows, concerts, and festivals. The facility was envisioned with community and our youth in mind. The U.S. has the highest rate of youth obesity among 15 of our peer countries, where 40% of females and 35% of males are obese. Nice. Activity through sports is directly tied to improved health and positive social, educational, and economic outcomes. Active kids are nearly 6 times more likely to become active adults. The proposed Springfield Indoor Track, Sports and Events Center welcomes the entire region to run, jump, throw, swing, toss, and celebrate within a space for everyone, from youth to adult. As a parent, I have seen how my son's physical well-being is impacted when he participates in a sports team. At the end of the season, he is stronger and leaner than when he began. And regardless of winning or losing, he has a positive mood after practice and games. Organized sports provide him with the much-needed exercise he otherwise would not seek out. It also teaches him lifelong skills of discipline and teamwork. I encourage each commissioner to learn more about this project and how it will impact the quality of life for our community members, physically, emotionally, and financially. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Next is Amy Newport, who will be followed by Jennifer Scheffler.
Thank you, Lane County Commissioners. My name is Amy Newport, and I am the Community Outreach Director for Kendall Auto, Oregon. In the 17 years working for Kendall and in this community, I have met a lot of people and seen the amazing good work that is done by nonprofits in this community. As the presenting sponsor of the Eugene Emeralds, I've had a front row seat to witness the dedication, time, and energy that their organization, excuse me, commits to helping our community in every way. The relationship that we have with the M's goes way beyond a marketing opportunity. It is a true partnership and a partnership that has meant working together on projects that strengthen and support our community year-round. Everything from their incredible reading program that's implemented in more than 50 schools in our school that encourages students to read more, to providing backpacks and school supplies to thousands of kids in need each year. And when the pandemic happened, they were instrumental in closing the digital divide by providing laptops, Wi-Fi, and headsets for more than 400 kids between Springfield, 4J, and Bethel School District. 2 years ago, when the holiday farm fires displaced hundreds of families, the M's once again stepped up. Their staff dedicated hundreds of hours setting up distribution centers filled with food, supplies, and any necessities the families needed within all 4 of the hotels that housed the families. They also provided meals and needed supplies to all the frontline workers and families upriver that were left without utilities. I could go on forever talking about all the ways that the M's have supported the community and have championed inclusivity and making the ballpark a safe and welcoming environment for everyone, including a huge positive impact on the Latino community. But instead, I will say that after all the years working aside Alan Benavidez and his phenomenal staff, I am still continue to be in awe of the forward thinking and tremendous impact that the M's organization has on the local nonprofits and our community as a whole. In addition, the economic impact that has been made by this team is tremendous. The local products that are used in the stadium, the local community members that they hire, and the dollars they bring, excuse me, I missed a page, sorry. The local community, the members that they hire, and the dollars that they bring into this community are almost unknown to the general public. In 2019, the M's played 38 games and hosted 8 events. From those, they produced $8.8 million in economic output. They provided 112 jobs, which provided $2.51 million in labor income to local people. That was 3 years ago. Imagine what could be done when the M's are able to expand their season at a new stadium and the community is able to host other events at the multi-use stadium. The economic engine of this multi-use facility will be tremendous. For instance, Bend is also my market, and I've currently put on the Kendall concert series. We had 89 concerts in Bend, with 59 being at the Hayden Amphitheater. Can you imagine the tremendous impact that could make, being able to house those exact same things here in Eugene?
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Newport.
Yep.
Next is Jennifer Scheffler, after which we'll transition to online testimony. Ms. Scheffler.
Chair Farr and Lane County Commissioners, thank you for your time today. My name is Jennifer Scheffler, and I wanted to share why bringing baseball to the fairgrounds is important to me and our community. I have been going to M's games since I can remember. My family has been season ticket holders since the early 80s and have enjoyed baseball at Civic Stadium up until the stadium was closed down. Both my parents graduated from South Eugene High School there, and I, in 2005, got married at Civic Stadium. So that should tell you how deeply connected I am to the M's and baseball. In addition, I have a unique perspective as I also live just 3 blocks from the fairgrounds in the friendly neighborhood. The M's are a powerful yet somewhat overlooked force for good in our community. They are so invested in giving back and making baseball accessible to everyone. I believe with a new multi-use facility located in the heart of Eugene, this will only allow the M's more opportunities to give back. The fairground location will also provide a more centrally located ballpark, which would mean more fans biking and walking, resulting in less neighborhood traffic. That's me. I believe the partnership between the fairgrounds and the M's is the investment our community needs to boost the surrounding area. The M's are committed to reaching out to all neighbors, listening to their concerns, and working towards solutions to what the neighborhood and the community needs. I cannot thank you enough for working toward this investment. And as a neighbor, I look forward to the possibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Scheffler. This concludes the in-person testimony. After online testimony, I'll ask if anyone else in the House would care to testify. At this point, Ms. Jones, I'll turn it over to you, please, to handle the queue for any online testimony.
Thank you, Chair Farr. At this time, we have no participants signed up online to give public testimony.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. And would anyone else in Harris Hall care to address the Board of County Commissioners? With that, we will conclude public testimony and move directly along to Commissioners' response to public comments and or other issues and remonstrances. Now we'll look for a queue. Thank you. I was getting ready to join the queue.
Get things going.
Commissioner Buck.
I want to thank those that spoke today. Clearly, we've had a lot of activity in Lane County regarding sports and venues for outdoor exercise with the games concluding last week. It was a phenomenal experience to be over at the World Games 2020 and see all these world athletes. And the feedback I received is that it was a different kind of experience for these athletes than they are used to at other much larger venues and much larger locations around the world that they would traditionally go to. And they got to come to little old Eugene and feel what it's like to be in a smaller town, but with world-class facilities. And both of the subjects speaking to tonight for the potential of an M stadium at the Fairgrounds, as well as an indoor track facility, would only, grow the world-class facilities that we have here in Lane County. And I'm excited to talk about them both as we move forward. And I appreciate you all taking the time to come here to speak to us today. We have only been back in person for a little while now, and we often get our public comment online. And so I think this is the first time in a long time we have not received public comment digitally or via Zoom or online, and it was all in person. And I really enjoy that. And I get to see and hear from new people, and that's a good thing for us. We need to hear from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Burney.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole and Amy and Jennifer, thank you very much for testifying. I don't know if the rest of this body feels the way I do, but it's so nice not to have people coming here and yelling at us about COVID one way or the other, or about what's not occurring in terms of farm rebuilding after the devastating fires. We've had a hell of a couple of years. So just to have people come and discuss in such a positive way things that we're looking at to benefit the community has been so refreshing. I just want to thank you very much. I want to say, Nicole, forgive me. I don't mean to be too familiar. Ms. Nelson, I think you're aware, but Commissioner Farr and I have participated for a number of years in an adjunct capacity with the SCDC and the indoor track. And I know that finding a home has been difficult. Several months ago, I have asked for a fairly rigorous review of the process and the triggers, because I know one of the sites that's being looked at is the transfer station in Glenwood, so that we can understand exactly whether the county is going to vacate that or not. If not, let people know as soon as possible. If so, what are the triggers and the processes that might allow that to happen? And as recently as Chair, I don't know, the last meeting or two, Chair Farr, who had just been in a meeting, also made that same request publicly. And so staff is on that. And we were told we were going to get a pretty detailed report within a few months. So I just wanted to share that with you. It's really interesting to hear the support for the M's. When I first moved back here 31 years ago, what I was told and what I found was the M's is one of the great levelers in our society here. I mean, no matter what people's background, no matter whether they're from, whether they're rich or poor or whatever, going to the M's game was it was just wonderful. And that's how I raised my three children. we look forward to what the opportunities are, and I'm delighted. And I don't know if you all know this, but Thursday, Mr. Benavides was mentioned. Thursday is his 49th birthday. So don't tell anyone I told you so. But you might want to say happy birthday to him. I thank you all so much. This was a refreshing public testimony. And I also am very supportive of seeing what the county can do to facilitate all of this. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me to go on and on a bit.
Thank you for all the happy news. Vice Chair Trigger.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll just echo the appreciation for folks taking the time to come down and talk to us in person. Thank you so much for your comments. I wanted to mention two things. I've been on vacation. I still technically am, came in for the meeting today, but I've spent a lot of time in rivers and creeks in the region. So just wanting to remind folks, we've had some really tragic events on the water here in our community. So just reminding everyone to please be safe and be careful when you're recreating on the water and doing campfires and so on while enjoying everything that there is to enjoy here in Lane County. I'll echo Commissioner Buck's comments about the Worlds. It was really exciting and fun. I got to go inside Hayward Field for some events. I got to spend quite a bit of time at the Riverfront Festival, and my grandsons, who are Churchill High School students, had the excitement of working out alongside some of the runners from Jamaica, some of the team who were using the gym facility at the high school. It was just exciting and fun to be around town and see so many different people and hear so many different languages spoken and watch folks enjoy all the restaurants and the facilities that we have here in the local community. So that was very exciting and really fun. The last thing I want to mention is the comments about Lane Event Center and the Fairgrounds remind me that we've received quite a bit of written testimony and concern from a number of people in the community about operations at the fair, at the county fair this year. We had a successful and an excellent fair. I got to go down to the fairgrounds a couple of times while the fair was active, including attending an evening concert and enjoying the midway and staffing a local community group booth indoors at the exhibit hall. And as always, the fair is a really great mix of our community and folks from outside coming to enjoy. Particularly what I enjoy is the roots of the agricultural community here. Looking at what the kids in 4-H are doing, looking at the quilts and the jams and all those fun things. So when you're there in the moment, you see how much people are enjoying it, but we did get quite a bit of written feedback on a number of different topics of concern that to me really just reflect how we are in a time of transition as a community, as a society, and we can always do better. We can always learn more. We can always understand how things are landing with folks, with our operations and the kinds of displays or entertainment or what have you that we contract out and provide through the fair. So as your liaison to the fair board, we have our first post-fair meeting this week. I know staff has already been in touch with those of us on the fair board that will start debriefing, taking all of that feedback on a number of different topics very seriously and seeing what we can do to do better while also recognizing that everybody comes to the fair with a different perspective and that there is no one way to hold a fair that absolutely everyone will agree with or appreciate. So that is the challenge in all the issues we take up. But anyone watching, I wanted to make sure that you knew that we, or at least I, as your liaison to the Fair Board, heard loud and clear the various feedback that we got on a number of different issues there. And we'll be working on them between now and next year's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Trigger. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. And I just want to appreciate everyone that came for public comment. Both facilities would be great additions to our community if we can make them all pencil out and they work out. And it was great to have some positive testimony. I agree with Commissioner Burney on that. I just couldn't let go without talking about DA Perlow's announcement this last week that we are no longer going to be prosecuting some low-level nonviolent felonies and many misdemeanors in Lane County due to lack of staffing in our DA's office, due to poaching of staff from state agencies, basically. The state over the years has disinvested in counties. At one point, they supplied 70% of our funding for our assessment and taxation department. It's 30% now. At one point, they funded our DA's office to where they were actually paying for deputy DA salaries. Now they barely pay for a portion of just the DA's salary. To give you an idea of how far that disinvestment has gone. They're doing the same thing in the community corrections, in our funding of our parole and probation system and the jail beds necessary for sanctioning those people, where it's been shrinking and shrinking with what they supply counties. At the same time, they're dealing with record revenues and giving their attorneys that, large increases to where we can't compete with them. While at the same time, being a timber county, we're also dealing with this lack of the federal support for the more than 50% they own of Lane County and the lack of local taxation of those lands. It's a crisis coming that's only going to get worse if the state doesn't start investing in local government and sharing with the partners to provide many of the services the state wants us to provide. They passed motor voter, which added workload to our elections department with no funding coming to our elections department. It happens over and over again that we have more requirements that we're doing on the state's behalf, yet they do not fund us. It has to change, and we have to have people contacting state legislators about this. But for the counties, many of our services would not happen. Public health. Think about the pandemic, response to the fires. We aren't getting the support we deserve. And it's going to create a public safety crisis. It's already created other crises locally. And it's great to think about stadiums and indoor track facilities, but this is basic government services and the safety of our public. We should be prosecuting all felonies. We're going backwards, back to where we were after the end of SRS in 2011, 12, 13, 14, when people thought Lane County might go bankrupt at one point. It's a serious issue. Please contact your legislators. Ask them to support counties. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. And I'll state this, that you didn't even touch on behavioral health issues, where the state continually adds additional responsibilities to counties through community restoration and through the aid and assist program, where the counties spend more, dilute services, and do not get any further assistance. We can talk much about that. But I have some happy things to talk about. If you all turn around and look outside that window right there, I love this because I get to stare at this. That is the Lane County Farmers Market in full operation today. Today's a Tuesday market. We love it. When you're through with Harris Hall, go over there, buy your produce from the Lane County farmers over there. That is a joint project of the city of Eugene and Lane County made that happen, a former Lane County property with some investment, cash investment from Lane County and a great deal of work from the city of Eugene. Love it. At some point, we'll see that more frequently than just on Tuesdays and Saturdays. It's going to be a year-round farmers market. It's a fully enclosed facility. So So good news on that. Second is we're talking about sports, and I'm going to talk about sports ever so briefly. People walk by my door on Praslin Street, Mr. Mocher. I live on Praslin, and right now I'm flying a flag, and the flag I'm flying is a white field with a red cross, which is commonly called the St. George's Cross, which is England's flag. I fly that flag because of sports, because the England women's soccer team won the European Championship over the weekend, beat Germany 2-1 in extra time at Wembley. First time England's hoisted a trophy of that type since 1966, when the men also beat Germany in the World Cup. So if you drive by my house and you wonder what that white cross on a red field is, that's a St. George's Cross in honor of the women's football team from England. Congratulations to them. And talking about the indoor track, we have talked about it for a number of years now, and it's gone through a lot of iterations. The first I really thought about it was one day I was talking to Vin Lanana, the former track coach from the U of O, and he said that the Millrose track had become available because it was no longer being used for the indoor track meet, the Millrose Games, and that we could possibly get. And I thought, well, that's, excuse me, that's pretty simple. We throw up a pole barn structure out to Jerry's buy a pole barn, put it up out of the fairgrounds and have the Millrose track. Well, it's not an official track. You know, it wouldn't serve for NC2A meets, for instance. So what we're talking about today is something more than just a pole building and more than just a track for only track purposes. This is a multi-use facility, and we'll continue to talk about that. Where is the appropriate siting for it? And as Commissioner Burney mentioned, we are talking about other county properties that potentially at some point may become available. You know, everything's in discussion at this point, or everything's in process. But thanks for being here this morning to highlight what really could be a really fun thing. You know, I don't think there's an indoor track, Commissioner Burney, between Seattle and San Francisco, maybe, or Oakland, or wherever the one is. So to have one here would be pretty amazing. Then the last thing I'm going to talk about is something that Commissioner Trieger touched on. Our lakes are full right now. There's a lot of water in them. A lot of people are recreating in the lakes and on the rivers and on the streams. And tragedies do happen. In fact, a tragedy happened yesterday on one of our local lakes where a teen drowned. And it became the responsibility of our sheriff's department at that point, as it is with all the waters outside of urban growth boundaries, outside of cities, is our sheriff's department that responds to tragedies of this kind. And they did last night. They recovered the teen's body from the lake, and amid a great deal of grief, it really is. I'm not going to say comforting, Commissioner Bozovich. Commissioners, I'm not going to say comforting to know that our sheriff's department is on the job to do these tragic tasks that we call upon them to do, but they are there, and they were there in very short notice to respond, and they did perform their duties well last night. And our hearts go out, our grief goes out to the family of the lost child. With that, we'll conclude Commissioner's response. Any further? Commissioner Burney.
Thank you kindly. Commissioner Bozovich? Oh, are you kidding?
I just noticed.
I don't know. I kind of like the name Bozovich.
Hey, we both begin with a B, but it might confuse the audience a little bit.
I was wondering what the hell you were doing. Okay, forgive me.
I just looked across and
We have an excuse. You all have no excuse on this.
we only see the back, which is blank, by the way. So, just so you know.
This is becoming a true informational session on how we work. I actually thank you for the second opportunity, Chair. I simply wanted to share with those, because we really are transitioning to more of in person, that commissioners respond to public comments. Some of you might be wondering, why are we talking about all this other stuff? Commissioners respond to public comments, and or it lets us talk about anything we want to talk about. And so we've heard about public safety in the context of this. I hope you have a sense of how frustrating it is for all of us, no matter what our ideology or preferences, to be on the delivery end of unfunded mandates. It stretches us so much. So every time something like an indoor track or a multi-use facility comes to this body, we have to assess that against all the other competing demands. And it is crazy out there. So I just want to let you know, and I would like to share as an example, we talk about physical health, and I happen to be, those crutches are mine. There's no way I'm running on any kind of a track for a while. But at the same time, I also want to share that in my district of Springfield, over 30% of all of the students in the Springfield School District are minority students. And while it's awesome that we can be talking about these things, and we should, and hopefully we can support them, I also want to make the public aware that there is a drive now called the Escudo Latino School Supply Drive. And it's just to get basic necessities for some of our low-income minority students in the Springfield School District. I am giving to that. If anyone is interested in giving to that, please let me know. Because while we're dealing with all these policy things, there's so many real community-based activities on the ground where just a few dollars can make the difference, all the difference in the world of a young person. I didn't want that to be neglected as we talk about also millions of dollars for some of these facilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Burney. Commissioner Buck.
Since we do get to talk about all kinds of things at this particular time in the meeting, we may have all noticed walking into this building that it smelled a little smoky outside. So I just wanted to remind people that we are in fire season, and that means be 2 weeks ready. You may be in an area where you need to evacuate. Wildfire maps have been released from the state of Oregon. They're being reviewed. A lot of people are in wildland urban interface areas that can be quite dangerous. And I just want to put that reminder out for anybody who's watching to make sure that you're prepared. We probably have a full 2 months before we see any kind of decent rain. And that's hoping that we get some decent rain in October. So just be careful out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Buck. And one last quick reminder, Ms. Mokrajewski, if people are still looking for booster vaccinations for COVID, Lane County is still operating at Valley River Center, I believe, on regular operation hours for vaccination, for booster vaccination. Still waiting for Moderna's advanced booster, which covers more variants of COVID. But those vaccines are still available, I understand, at Valley River Center. With that, we'll move directly along, and we have before us a board. The consent calendar. A consent calendar is published online, and if you click on View Items online, you'll see all of the items that go into the consent calendar item the Board of County Commissioners has considered before placing this on the consent calendar. Do I have a motion? Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move approval of the consent calendar for Tuesday, August 2nd, 2022.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger, seconded by Commissioner Burney. We have the consent calendar, which is placed on the consent calendar because of the nature of the items. I will call any discussion to the item, to the motion. I see none. Call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously. With that, we'll move along to our item 7 on our agenda is County Council for announcements. I've checked with Mr. Dingle today, and we have no County Council announcements. We're on item 6. Oh, I'm on. Oh, that little thing. I was just seeing if you'd catch that. So on Public Works, we have before us Order 280802-07 in the matter of appointing a committee of 3 residents to draft an impartial, simple, and understanding explanatory statement for November 8th, 22 state voters pamphlet regarding the questions of a 5-year funding levy to support the Lane County Parks Division. And with us today, Mr. Mokrajewski, we have Director Hurley, and I'll ask you to well, Director Hurley's not here, so I'll ask you to introduce Mr. Henry and the rest of our panel.
Thank you, Chair. Director Hurley is not with us today, but we have Brett Henry, our Parks Manager. And I want to just make a few comments because oftentimes we forget in the, we're talking about issues like this we've been working on for a long time, and you've had several presentations over several months and years. We forget to revisit that history and remind everyone how we got to where we are. So I wanted to just do a little bit of that more recent history that a few on the board will remember that back in 2018 and for several years prior to that, Lane County and our Parks Advisory Committee and our Parks team worked aggressively on updating our Parks Master Plan. It was out of date for well over a decade. Do you recall?
I think a little bit longer than that.
Yeah. So it would the update to the Parks Master Plan was well out of date. We put a lot of work into that. It was not without challenges and a lot of investment by the members of the Parks Advisory Committee. In 2018, the Parks Master Plan was completed and ultimately adopted by the Board of Commissioners. We then subsequently that year and actually I believe it was in, let me think about this now. It would have been early 2019. So the next year in 2018, the Parks Master Plan was completed, and then early 2019 in the proposed fiscal year 19-20 budget, we proposed, the Budget Committee unanimously supported, and the Board of Commissioners unanimously supported the creation of a Parks Advisory, a Parks Funding Task Force. The board subsequently at a later date appointed the members to that task force that were representative of individuals across Lane County. And that group met prior to the pandemic, and then throughout the pandemic. We also had leadership change at that time. Mr. Henry came on board, took over the reins at Parks, and has done an incredible job of leading that work and other work to sustain and build our park system. So that group throughout the pandemic, which was of course a challenging effort, and Mr. Henry can speak more to that work by the Parks Funding Task Force that was again proposed in 2018, 2019. Then in 2021, phase one of the facility condition assessment report was conducted and presented to the Board of Commissioners. That was sort of a furtherance of the Parks Master Plan to actually quantify what are the needs, what are the facility condition and investment needs that are required to bring our park system up to a reasonable standard. And then again in 2021, the Parks Funding Task Force report was presented to the board actually a week after this facility condition assessment was presented to the board. The Parks Funding Task Force brought forward and outlined 3 funding alternatives. So after 2 years of work by that group and a lot of this planning and facility assessment, recommendations were made to the Board of Commissioners by the residents that had been actively involved in that work. So I just wanted to share that history to provide some context to how we got to this place that we're at today. Mr. Henry also included in the memo that you have before you history that goes back decades and talks, of course, about the challenges with timber funding and some of the things that Commissioner Bozovich alluded to as it relates to public safety funding also impact other areas of the county like our parks. We talked about in this last budget cycle for our current budget during the budget committee meetings, the 4 distressed funds that we have in Lane County, the general fund that is sort of, we call it the mothership where all the property tax dollars are collected. It is the discretionary fund that the board really has the ability to decide where that money gets spent. And it ends up being the core, much of the core of what we do as a service provider for the community. Pretty much the vast majority of our public safety services are funded out of the general fund. So that fund is the mothership, and it is financially distressed and not structurally balanced. The other 3 funds are the Parks Fund, Parole and Probation Fund, and the Land Management Fund. And one of the comments that we made during the budget process is that in most other counties throughout Oregon, and in my experience around the country, most other counties provide some level of general fund, local property tax dollars that support those other areas. And that's certainly the case in Oregon. Most counties that are similar to Lane County provide property tax subsidy or support for their park system, for their land management, planning and building division, and for their parole and probation. But because our general fund is so financially distressed, and we don't have the resources to adequately staff our public safety system, we certainly don't have the ability to fund these other areas. So we are in search of long-term sustainable solutions. A few things that we have done over the past few years during this time of planning and developing options for the future. We did in the fiscal year 19-20 budget fund 2 additional positions. We funded the facilities condition assessment, and we funded some one-time projects with transient room taxes. So we're doing what we can do to sort of nibble around the edges at supporting our park system. But this recommendation for advancing a request of the voters for additional property tax support is before the board now as one of the recommendations from the Parks Funding Task Force. And the decision, that's all historical context. So thank you for indulging me with that piece. The decision in front of the board today is not whether or not to refer this to the voters. The decision today is simply to create the explanatory, thank you, Brett, I'm getting back in the swing of things here. The 3 residents that will draft the impartial, simple, and understandable explanatory statement for the ballot. So the board, this does not lock the board into referring the matter to the ballot. It is a timing issue, and we want to make sure that the explanatory committee has the time necessary to draft the language to refer this matter to the ballot by August 17th, I believe is the date that the county council has to refer it to the clerk. So the referral will be in front of you next week. The decision on the referral will be in front of you next week. We're asking for you to approve the explanatory statement today so that we can get that ball rolling. And at the risk, I probably stole some of your thunder, Brett, but I wanted to just provide that historical context so you can fill in any blanks that I left.
Oh, Steve, I think you said it better than I could. We've been before you many times before. And really, I think we're getting down to the home stretch, and we certainly appreciate the attention that you guys have given us and support. This has been a long road. This has just not happened since I've been here since 2018. This has been a 40+ year situation that the parks has dealt with. And, if you go to our parks, I think you'll see guys that are working hard, gals that are working hard, and that our facilities are in pretty darn good shape, considering the amount of revenue that comes in. And so I'm very proud of our staff and the job that they're doing. I'm also very, very excited about this opportunity. It's an incredible chance that we have to give us a needed boost to get things back in order, make our parks safe, make our parks green, and make our parks accessible for more individuals. So, we're really excited about this opportunity. And I do want to say, getting back to this board order that's on the agenda today, that county staff will be here to coordinate with the appointed committee to arrange any meetings, the times, the locations, and ensure that the community members have everything they need to file the explanatory statement. So we'll be on hand to assist with that. And I believe Devin is working on getting a slide up that was going to have some sample ballot language for you guys.
I like the slide that's up there.
Yeah, the computer chose to restart. I apologize, commissioners, but I have no control over technology services.
Okay.
We do have.
Just a moment.
So we have draft language. We will circulate that to the board. We'll post it online. So the public can see that. And that will be the decision before you next week, is the actual draft language and whether or not to refer that to voters. I wanted to also mention we have Bob Kiefer in the audience. Of course, we all know Bob. Building's named after Bob for his great work. He used to actually be the parks manager here in Lane County many, many years ago. He, of course, ran the Willamette Park and Recreation District that is renowned for its quality and for its success in achieving funding from property taxpayers in the Springfield area and from voters, and for delivering on the promises that are made there. We worked and contracted with Bob throughout this process, really to lead our Parks Funding Task Force effort because of his success, his really storied success in doing that in other places. So we feel like the process that we've gone through, and I want to be clear that, this is in advancing this work, we're not saying that parks is more or less important than anything else that we do. We are saying that the options for funding, Commissioner Brozovic brought up public safety, and I personally could not agree more that the state has failed in its support for funding much of our public safety system. And we look at the other distressed funds that we have in Lane County, our land management division. The board has done a great job at making some moderate adjustment to fees and looking creatively at video lottery funds and supporting that area. We know that parole and probation, we need to go to the state and secure additional funding. The challenge that we have with funding our park system is traditionally park systems are funded by local property taxpayers. That is, and I've seen in some cases it's a sales tax. We don't have a sales tax, of course, in Oregon. And so there really are no property taxes that support our park system. It's transient room taxes. I don't think we have car rental anymore, but fees, fee-based. Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly fee-based, certainly. And we don't want to go that route. We don't want to increase fees. We want to make sure that our services are available and sustainable into the future. And we know that a fee-based system cannot sustain our park system as it is. So, yeah.
Thank you, Devin, for bringing this up. And, I was going to fill the gap with a little bit of my personal experience in parks. We'll cover that later, Mr. Henry. It looks like your technology has caught up with you. So great.
Yeah, so you see before you the ballot title, the language, the caption, question. And this was, this is not a final draft yet, and this will be presented to you at the board meeting next week. But we wanted you to take a look at it and have some introduction to it, as well as the public. And you can see investment is a key word there. And, you're limited to a certain number of words. And this all needs to be approved by the county and the state. And so there's a formal process to it. And we certainly welcome your input in drafting that language. But we feel like after talking to the county assessor, we have a pretty good idea of what the assessed value would be, which is 16 cents per 1,000. And, it has all the descriptive language in there for you to take a look at. We will also send you, each one of you, a personal draft of the language so you guys can provide us comments as well.
Thank you.
I believe there's another slide, or is this just one? Okay, yeah. And of course, the summary, which is much longer, 175 words. You can see, wanted to make sure that we hit all the important points and we're as descriptive as possible of what is in the levy. We did struggle to meet the word requirement, but I think what we did is have a pretty good summation of what is in the levy package. And one thing I do want to mention is we've said that this is a 5-year local option levy. Then the estimate previously was $30 million over that time span. Looking at the new assessed value, it's going to be closer to 31 million is the estimate that we have right now. So we did make some slight adjustments to those allocations, and we will present those to you next week.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Mr. Henry and Ms. Mokrowski. I want to say this. I'm pretty excited about this. I'm talking personally right now. My wife and I and my entire family use our county parks. The reason we use our parks, we live in the city of Eugene. They're a stone's throw away. We short drive from the city of Eugene. We live in the heart of this. Every place in Eugene's the heart of the city of Eugene, and it's just a very short drive to a lot of parks. And we. You can walk around parks. You don't have to spend any money other than an annual pass, which is very inexpensive. And it's not the right place for me to talk about how enthusiastic I am or why I am, but I think you can see the effervescence, is that a good term? That I am enthusiastic about moving forward with this. But I'd like to point out that we've not made a decision on putting this on the ballot yet. As Mr. Mokrowski pointed out, that discussion comes 1 week from today. Today's discussion is simply a timing issue. If we do move it to the ballot next week, then we will have created the correct timing to get the committee in place to make the statement. That's a correct statement. Very good. Then let's have some discussion from the board. I'll begin with the Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Just keeping it to what we're here to talk about, which is making sure we're moving in the right direction on time to get the committee in place should we refer this to the ballot to have the statement. So just responding and reflecting, I do, as you said, really appreciate the word investment. These parks are an asset for this organization, and it's our responsibility to protect assets and make the best of the investments we have. And this for me, and again, as Chair pointed out, we'll have a more robust conversation about the content or the merits of a levy. But to me, it really isn't about do we invest in our parks, it's when. And if we don't invest in them now, the cost of protecting them, protecting that investment later will only increase. So just looking ahead to the conversation, looking forward to the conversation next week when we get to dig in a little more on the merits of this approach for how we protect this investment and deliver the best possible services to the community using these assets that we already hold that have been, for a number of reasons, not only neglected, but the usage is really increasing. So I'm also looking forward to hearing more about that generally, but we know during the pandemic in particular, when people were needing safe outdoor opportunities to relieve stress and engage, our park system really have been elevated to the asset that they are for the whole community. And additionally, we haven't really talked about folks who come from out of the area. So they really are also part of our strategy around tourism and promoting the region and welcoming guests. So my only comment specific to this is I really appreciate the word investment, that we make sure voters understand that's what we're doing, is protecting an investment we've already made to improve an asset that we already hold on behalf of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Further discussion, Commissioner Burney, followed by Commissioner Buck.
Yeah, rather than tiptoeing around whether commissioners are for moving forward, which we'll discuss next week, I'd like to ask some questions that pertain to the presentation right here. Mr. Henry, you mentioned I wrote this down, making the parks safe and green and accessible. Aren't we also taking care of deferred maintenance and making them functional again? And isn't that the reason why we're talking about a potential levy here?
Yeah, certainly. The parks need to be open. They need to be functional, as you mentioned, for us to be able to welcome residents to enjoy the scenery, to enjoy recreation opportunities. And so, yeah, I could say just from this past weekend, we had a water issue once again at Richardson, where we had a main line that broke, and we have a lot of campers out there. We had to make sure that we fixed that in a timely manner, authorized overtime. The guys were working into the evening hours, just trying to repair that and make sure that we continue to provide these services.
And that's the driving force, is it not?
That is a substantial part of this, for sure. Yes.
And I also had another question, if I might, on the first slide, the first of two. So, and if you can't, oh, there you go. Is it, maybe this is required, I don't know, forgive my naivete. But the last line, this measure may cause property taxes to increase more than 3%. Isn't that the case with any potential levy? Is that language that has to be there and is on there for, okay, is that the case? Okay. Okay.
It's required. Yes.
Got it. Those are my questions as it pertains to the topic at hand. I was delighted, and just so the board is aware, that that I've had the opportunity to appoint, and he's accepted Greg James to be part of this body. And Greg used to be chair of Willamette. He's on the SCDC board, which is talking about the indoor track. He's very engaged in Springfield, and understand that Springfield has as Mr. Mokrahysky mentioned, has a thriving park system. We love our parks and we pay for them. And so I would say that if one was to be myopic, my community might have the least interest in this need of any group. But Greg's enthusiastic, Mr. James is enthusiastic. I was pleased to appoint him. I hope he adds value. And I'm certainly going to vote to move forward on this. I could make the motion unless other people want to talk before a motion is made, Chair.
We have a queue, and I'll ask the people in the queue, do you want to speak before? Let's go before the motion. Okay, Commissioner Buck.
All right, I could go either way, but I just wanted to make a point that before I became commissioner 4 years ago, we had a board that approved a waterfront parks plan. And part of that was to put together the task force that has ultimately brought this in front of us. I remember in my first years as commissioner, I was able to meet at one of the very first meetings of the task force. And that was, of course, pre-COVID, which threw a wrench in things for everything. But certainly there was forward motion on working on this. So that task force was asked by the board prior to myself being on to review this and see what we can do. And you've done that work. You've done probably thousands of hours, volunteer hours, going through every possible scenario that could be presented to us this summer. And I want to appreciate all those volunteers. I appreciate the staff that has spent the time in going through each and every meeting with these volunteers and being able to finally come back to the board as requested and presenting the material today. This has been clearly years, decades probably in the making. And I'm supportive of moving forward with what we have in front of us today. But I just want to make a special point that those volunteers love our parks. That's why they do it. They love our community, and they could be doing any other thing with their time. But the community service is so appreciated. And I want to thank them very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Then we'll move along with the motion, but I guess I'll step in the queue first. If my house were worth $1 million, $1 million, if my house were, it's not, by the way, it's not. I'd be paying $160 a year, right? Yeah. Is that right? Is my decimal point, I moved the decimal point of 1, 2, 3.
1.16, yeah.
Yeah, $160 a year on $1 million house. I think that's less than 3% of the tax. Anyway, let's move along with the, do I have a motion, Commissioner Burney?
Yes, Chair, but forgive me, I have to clarify. If your house were assessed at $1 million, which means it probably would have been worth or appraised for more than $1 million. I already did the math. It's going to cost me $60 a year. I move approval of order 22-08-02-07.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. We have a motion on order, excuse me. What Commissioner Burney said. Lost my motion. Discussion to the motion. Commissioner Bozovich.
Quickly, because I'll discuss the merits of the levy or not next week. I just want to note, folks, the first whereas is the Board of Commissioners will consider placing the question on the ballot. We're not placing it today. I know all 3 members that are to be appointed. I think it's a good committee, and I'm going to be voting in favor of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Further discussion to the motion? I'm not seeing any, but I will say that, you know, the Parks Department deals with so many different issues that really are outside of our control. For instance, any park around Fern Ridge or any of the other reservoirs, you have to deal with the Corps of Engineers, and you have to deal with a separate set of standards and orders and rules and requirements. So, you know, when I make a request, which I have recently for a little tiny beach at Richardson, that would cost hardly anything. We have to get the approval of the Corps of Engineers before we do it. And that's a process that we need to go through. All of this is understandable. And once again, as we move forward with this is the first step, which gets us in timing to cover whether or not the board passes the motion next week or moves it forward next week to the ballot. So with that, no further discussion. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. Mr. Morgan, Mr. Henry, thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Kiefer, thank you for being here today. It's good to see you again. And we'll move along to item number 9. I'm kidding.
What, it's not good to see Mr. Kiefer again?
We'll move along. Now we'll move along to item number 7, which is County Council. And Mr. Dingle has informed me that there are no council announcements. Mr. Moker High School will move along to item 8A, County Administration. And we have before us Order 2208-02-08 in the matter of appointing representatives to various committees and agencies. If you're watching this online, you can click on View Material and you'll see the order we're considering at this point in time. Much of the order you'll see is a revision of or just a restatement of an order that was passed in January, appointing members of the Board of County Commissioners to various committees and agencies. We're making a little bit of an adjustment to that with this order. Mr. Moker-Heisky.
Thank you, Chair. I think Ms. Jones was going to lead this item.
I am on the line, Steve.
Okay.
This item is simply returning to the board for discussion at last week's board meeting. Head nods were given to appoint Commissioner Buck and Commissioner Farr to serve on the new Homes for Good formation for housing. So that is what this is doing. This board order will set the term through 2023, and then it will become a routine item in January of 2024 with the other board committee items.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Any discussion from the board? Now, since Commissioner Buck, all of our names are on this order, by the way, so we don't have a conflict of interest here, even though our names are on this order. Commissioner Burney.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just pointing to the chair that Commissioner Bozovich was trying to get your attention.
Oh, Commissioner Bozovich.
I just want to quickly explain why I'll be voting no on this order. and I mentioned this last week, the length of the term of the appointment is beyond the first of the year when we have a new board sworn in and seated. And it is typical that these appointments to boards are made in January by the board that is currently going to be in power. I believe the attempt to take this beyond then is to try and extend the current majority's power beyond when they may be in power or not. And therefore I object to it, but I will also note that it is only a board order and can get overruled by a majority of the board vote in January. So I will be voting no.
Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner Bozovich. Further discussion to the motion? Then we have before us order 2208. No, we don't have it yet. We have a motion, please.
Chair, I'll move approval of item order number 22-08-02-08 in the matter of appointing representatives to various committees and agencies.
Second.
Moved by Vice Chair Trieger and seconded by Commissioner Burney. Do we have discussion to the motion? Seeing and hearing none, I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hey,
Passes 4-1 with Commissioner Bozovich against. Ms. Mokrowski, item 8B is a discussion and status update on the Affordable Housing Action Plan. And you have a panel with you today, and I'll turn it over to you to introduce the panel and begin the discussion.
Thank you, Chair. Really pleased to welcome Steve Adams and Sarai Johnson. Of course, Steve is our new policy team director and Sarai is our shelter and housing strategist. As the board knows, we've consolidated a number of various roles in the organization that are focused on different policy portfolios into this policy team. And we're just really excited about the opportunities for growth and development throughout all of the work that this team is doing. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Adams and Ms. Johnson for the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Mokrowski, thank you. Chair Farr, Commissioners, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning as well. It's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Ms. Johnson. Sadly, noting that this morning will be her final presentation and a quarterly update to each of you on our affordable housing plan. After a number of years of really strong service to Wayne County, Ms. Johnson is stepping down to take a little bit of time to herself and to consider what is next in her adventure. Her time with us has really been quite remarkable. On Monday, as you know, Chair Farr, we will be opening formally the Navigation Center. Ms. Johnson, throughout the course of the pandemic, played an incredibly valuable role in helping to advance that facility. It served us well during the heart of the pandemic as our isolation and quarantine facility for our unhoused community. We took it offline last summer, put it into renovation, and now it is coming online to serve a higher and better use moving forward. So as a colleague, I've only had just a few months to work with Sarai in this role. Specifically, I have learned a ton from her. I am grieving her departure, but I am grateful to her for her service. And we already, Sarai has been spending most of her time helping to prepare me for life beyond Ms. Johnson as our colleague in the policy team. So with that, I just want to make the board aware of her departure, and I turn it over to Sarai to provide an update to you.
Thank you, Mr. Adams, and thank you, Chair Farr, Commissioners. It's wonderful to be here with you today again. And marking the occasion of me moving on, it is my first time in person since I started in this role. So what a fun moment to see you all in real life. This update is going to follow the same format as we've used several times. So hopefully it'll just build on the knowledge that you already have about the progress we're making. And then I'll also be providing a 6-month outlook for what my recommendations are for next steps on working this plan. Of course, in our strategic plan, we have a goal to make housing available and affordable to people at every level of income in Lane County. And as we know right now, that is not the case. And so we will be continuing to work on this so we can expand our supply of housing and ultimately create more availability in that market. We'll go over the update on where we are so far, what we've accomplished this year, status of the actions that we've shown as priorities and that the board has consented. And then we'll have the 6-month action plan and time for board feedback, of course. The suspense is killing me. Oh, what have we done in 2022? So far this year, we've established 5-year housing production targets, at least a range for that based on the regional housing needs analysis, which of course isn't complete since we don't have unincorporated numbers in there. But the work that we're doing around collaborating with municipalities and seeing what is possible for them in their jurisdictions will also input, or rather feed into, the work we're doing with unincorporated communities. We also, as you know, have an updated report about the Mackenzie River rebuilding and recovery. And so we do have some numerical targets for that region, and hopefully we'll be able to gather some in other unincorporated areas soon. We've confirmed the board priorities for implementation of this plan. We've consulted with architects, builders, and other stakeholders who are engaged in building and producing housing. We've developed an approach for Lane County to support housing from this position that the county holds that's very unique and specific, and then determined a 6-month action plan. So next action status. These are the things that we've prioritized as the things we need to work on this year. There's a more thorough accounting for it in your board memo, in the board memo related to this item. We work to align housing with other countywide plans, including the climate action plan, disaster recovery plans, and resiliency plans, and so forth. And so housing does have a component in almost every plan because it touches on social determinants of health as well as economic viability for the county and the region, and more. So this is really an important one for us to continue to weave into every conversation that we're having about decisions we're making on resources and so forth. We also have evaluated county-owned property for possible housing use and have implemented the first right of refusal foreclosure, tax foreclosure program, where our facilities team and our policy team and others work together to identify possible county-owned properties or upcoming tax foreclosures that may be suitable for use as housing, and especially to recommend the highest and best use for any of those parcels if it should include housing. So for instance, if a corner lot in anywhere in the county might come up as a tax foreclosure, there are many different options about how that could potentially be developed into housing, including duplexes or fourplexes because of House Bill 2001. And then we want to make sure that we're maximizing the places that are available for building and leveraging that land. We also want to expand our financial resources for housing production, which could include state and federal level grants or other awards, as well as potentially partnerships and leveraging other investment as well. We will be working and have been a little bit tangentially in the mix on working with our educational institutions on development of the trades. There's a lot more work that can be done there and additional partners that can be leveraged that we haven't exactly gotten into yet. So I think that's an important one for us to put on the docket for probably the coming 12 months, although it doesn't have a like super hard footing in the next 6 months. But that's just my perspective. We also have started to facilitate some rural strategies around community land trusts and limited equity cooperatives, looking at those models and how they can be applied to different land use restrictions in rural areas, especially in unincorporated areas, and what options do we have to support building effectively and within the intent of keeping our rural communities rural, while also providing housing for the number of people who actually live or want to live in those areas. And then we've started some conversations around the faith community land for housing production potentially. Those conversations haven't moved forward aggressively, but I think there is interest, and we see one great project that's happening with Square One Villages, Peace Village, which I know you're all aware of. And I think this can be a really great demonstration for the faith community in our area to see how their land can be put to use to help many, many people. In this case, it's a limited equity cooperative and a community land trust, both of which are great mechanisms to keep land affordable or not a part of the equation of the house, while creating opportunities for more ownership. And then ultimately, we also would like to increase BIPOC homeownership opportunities. And we do have $522,000 from ARPA for that purpose. And we haven't written that RFP up yet, but we will be continuing to work on it by gathering input from people of color in our community, and especially those who have been intentionally excluded from housing opportunity and or whose land or housing has been taken from them through some kind of government action in the past. The housing production strategies, just as a quick overview of what those main categories are, for reference, I built the 6-month plan off of these production strategies as kind of the conceptual container for this. So one is reduce regulatory and financial impediments to building, create regulatory and financial incentives to spur building, and then provide access to local, state, and federal resources, which we can really dial that in for sure, and then allow for local innovation. In the way that I suggest the county approach this is by starting first with our own internal processes where it comes to building permits and making decisions about land use and so forth. So working with our planning and development division, as well as other housing related divisions throughout the county to work on that. And then from there, expanding out into unincorporated communities, supporting the leadership in those communities to develop housing production targets and strategies that are appropriate for where they are. And then we'll move into supporting municipalities with whatever their plans are, supporting them on implementing some of these housing strategies as appropriate, and or where there's partnership available or opportunities for that, exploring those and putting those into place. And then finally, the state of Oregon with, of course, their statewide land use policies and so forth. We will, I'm sure, anticipate some legislative needs or board actions that might need to occur to make sure that it's possible for people to build. And then finally, federal advocacy. And this isn't necessarily a linear path. There are certainly things that just Lane County has control of and opportunity to make decisions. And some of those also will imply state. And so we're surely going to be kind of hopping around between these zones a lot. But I do think that focusing in on what Lane County itself can do right now is a really powerful way to get started and to get some momentum behind us. So the first 6-month action steps are centered on reducing regulatory and financial impediments to building. Some of my early conversations with home builders, architects, and others have cited some process challenges that they're having sometimes with the building permit system, and that there are, especially building in unincorporated areas, so many different restrictions and a few things that could be tweaked to potentially increase our housing development in those areas. So some of that has to do with state level work, and some of it has to do with what we ourselves are able to implement process-wise internally. So the first step would be to review existing permitting processes and fees with our planning division and other stakeholders, including architects, builders, and landowners, others who have an interest in that. Then we'll identify barriers that can be removed immediately or directly by staff if there's process things that can be shifted, and also a higher level than that, anything that might require board action or state level advocacy or legislation potentially. And then finally, we'll collaboratively increase the flow of building permitting. So hopefully by releasing or reducing these impediments, whether it's a process, a fee, or a policy that can be changed, we'll be looking at a more open pipeline to prepare the way for more building to happen. And then we have the next one, which is create regulatory and financial incentives. So we're removing barriers, and now we're creating incentives for people who otherwise would not be able to build at the scale we need. I would look to convene building partners, including financial institutions, so we can identify incentives that are needed. Where do builders and others who are involved in the process need some additional help or additional funds or whatever it might be to leverage to make these things happen? And then we'll also start within Lane County's direct jurisdiction on incorporated areas to identify how these incentives can be developed and what opportunities there are for that. And then to connect all of these incentives to the county's land banking program and that foreclosure first right of refusal program I mentioned a little bit ago. Because regulatory and financial incentives don't just mean money, it could also mean land or reducing the cost of land over time. And there are a lot of different mechanisms for that we've also been exploring in the land banking program conversation. we have provide access to local, state, and federal resources. And this one is largely centering on grant strategy. So with the policy team and other housing related divisions throughout the county, along with our stakeholders, builders, people who want to own a home, people who need housing, et cetera, to develop a federal and state level funding plan. And this would be a part of work that's already starting to happen within the policy team on helping to support a countywide collaborative conversation about grants so that we can centralize that planning more effectively and then make sure that we're leveraging and distributing funds that are available to improve our housing pipeline or provide incentives throughout the county. So this is something that is partially underway. We've started on mostly with the ARPA team, and I believe this specific set of work can be done relatively quickly, at least to compile the information and then start that interdepartmental and divisional collaboration. We'll also want to create process to make sure that we're taking the opportunities as they come to us and making decisions about whether to pursue a certain funding opportunity or not. And then how do we gather the information and engage with the divisions and departments who need to be involved in this to make the proposal and then to manage that grant if we were to get it. And then we have additional work with our financial partners outside of the organization to collaborate on maximizing any funds that we are able to capture and also to leverage their expertise in managing things like revolving loan funds or other financial mechanisms that the county itself isn't likely to take on. And now allow for local innovation. This is where we just get out the finger paints and see what we can come up with. We do have opportunity to identify housing production strategies that are specific to Lane County. We have a few things that are very specific to us, aside, as uniquely within Oregon. And I think there are a lot of opportunities for us to explore what are the pros and cons of those, what are the opportunities we have within those things, and identify ways to test things. So getting basically a minimum viable pilot kind of out the door, measuring it, seeing how it works, and then adapting it, whether we're going to keep doing it, expand on it, build on it, or go in a different direction. And I think that process will become easier over time. And that will also give us an opportunity to really see if things we're trying to do make sense by creating metrics and ongoing measurement for any and all of those programs. Build and maintain these creative partnerships with a variety of stakeholders, both within the construction industry and, of course, educational, vocational fields and beyond, workforce development, et cetera. And then finally, we want to make sure that our nonprofit developers in our county and our region have opportunities to participate in this work as well, for they have additional funds they're able to leverage in different ways than the county is directly. So if we can create a little bit of a center of gravity around ensuring that housing production doesn't have all those impediments, that we have some incentive opportunities, and then ultimately that we can create a path forward together with our partners and stakeholders, we'll be able to make a pretty good dent in this, I think. As you saw in past presentations, our increase year over year in the last 5 years has been pretty significant, about that 28% average increase each year over that period of time. And so I think naturally we will be able to build more. And also, I think if we're able to implement some of these projects, especially around land banking and some of these incentives and then removing impediments in the process, we'll be able to really expedite that. Here's our performance metrics that we've proposed, and I've kind of brought them back up a bunch of different times. There's additional ones that are big overarching measures, which include the percentage of people in our county who are cost burdened or highly cost burdened by housing, as well as our rental vacancy rate and the amount of space we have in the home ownership market. So those ones aren't written on this specific slide, but they are captured elsewhere in the materials from past presentations and as just a part of the guiding light of this plan. And now it's your turn, and I appreciate your time. I turn it back to you, Chair Farr.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Mr. Adams.
Nothing further, Chair Farr, at this time. Appreciation for my colleague in laying out a very aggressive 6 months forward. So much of what my colleague has laid out is, of course, on the docket for the policy team as we move forward. Recruitment has begun in earnest, as you can imagine, almost immediately. It is an incredibly important piece of work that we have to carry forward. So certainly continuing to invest staff time and effort into this topic is a top priority, but it will be difficult to replace my colleague.
Well stated. Then we'll ask the board for discussion to the items that that have been presented on. Begin with Commissioner Buck. I have a few things to say when the time comes. But
I want to especially thank you for all your dedication that you have provided over the last few years. Even prior to your current role in partnership with the city of Eugene, we have gotten a lot of good stuff done in spite of what the world has thrown our way. And I sincerely appreciate working with you and thank you for all that you've done. This is, of course, a key role in implementing our Affordable Housing Action Plan. And I look forward to whomever becomes into that position. And I know they can't fill your shoes, but they'll sure try. This is an exceptional presentation today. So you're really going out with a bang and setting it up for the next person who will be in this position. These are great. This is the kind of goals. Had COVID not hit us, had wildfires not hit us, we would have been working on, last year, year and a half ago. But things happen, and we keep moving forward each and every day. We're still doing the best that we can, and moving forward. I look forward to speeding this process up. I know this is a lot to do in 6 months, but knowing that for me, housing, and for the county, housing is one of our top subjects. And this is what we've been getting as feedback from people, not only commenting, but through elections, they have told us this is the subject: housing, housing, housing. And providing what we can do for services for those that are unsheltered. And I want to see us work on this plan in earnest and as fast as we can do it. I know it will take some time to find a person that can fill your shoes. But this is one of my biggest passions and one of the main reasons I, of course, ran for this position. And so I will just be excited to work with whomever we get and lend any assistance that I can to ensure that this continues to be first and foremost on our agendas on a regular basis.
thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? Commissioner Bernie.
On a personal level, good luck. No, I mean, I'm sure you're burnt and exhausted and looking for other options. On the board level, we're talking about housing. I don't think it's housing. I think it's housing, safety, climate, poverty, war, racism, and the variety of topics that hit this body. This is housing. Forgive me if I'm a bit frustrated because what we have are recommendations to move forward and talking about stuff, and that's what we've been having for a long time. I think that had COVID not occurred, we wouldn't have been able to do as much because of some of the federal resources that have come our way. And it's my understanding, in fact, here's my first question. It's my understanding that the American Recovery Plan is now municipalities and are now being told that a lot of that money can go to a lot more housing types if it's left. Is that correct?
I don't know if
I read Biden made a statement to that effect last week.
Okay.
I'm not aware,
Okay.
Chair Farr, Commissioner Bernie, I'm not aware.
Okay, it's my understanding,
Last week.
not that that will help because our dollars are somewhat committed, but it is my understanding that uncommitted dollars now can go to a variety of more housing types than is currently available. I don't think we would have gotten as many dollars in, and Homes for Good especially, but other entities. In 2019, my first year here, I requested several times the county assess all county-owned property, other municipality or public entity property, faith-based community property that might be used for partnerships around housing. And I'm not satisfied that we've done enough of that, including private property that is vacant or warehouse property that might be converted. There are so many creative things that other communities are doing. I highly encourage this body to do that. And Sarai, you know, I'm not being critical. Okay, I think we both share the same passion for trying to get more done. I think that the market, the real estate market, is a bigger determinant in what's affordable than anything that government does. We can work around the edges, and we should. I don't agree with the statement that Lane County is unlikely to take on a revolving loan fund properly structured. I've spent a lot of time with Judy Williams talking about how one could leverage existing infrastructure, from title companies to real estate appraisers to home builders to banks that provide mortgages for home builders, how we could, without getting into the weeds for this body, how we could structure that so the county isn't doing what the county doesn't do, which is running a revolving loan fund for housing development, but the county establishes guidelines and just holds financial institutions that already exist to the fire in exchange for deposits. So there are a variety of things I feel we need to do. I share Commissioner Buck's desire to move faster. We can't keep planning. We have to start producing. And anything we can do to that effect, I'm exceedingly supportive of. I'm going to give you one more quick example. I would love to see creativity such as my community of Springfield seed owns 9 acres. There was a proposal for that 9 acres to be turned into 600 units of housing, 300 supported, privately developed, and a hotel. That did not go through with that body. But there might be some partnerships that we haven't even explored that can really create a magnitude of impact. So thank you, Sarai. Wish you nothing but Godspeed. And those are my inputs moving forward, Mr. Adams. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Bernie. Commissioner Bozovich.
Thank you. I'm going to say a few things that I'm sure my colleagues aren't going to agree with me on, which happens pretty often. But the first thing I'm going to say is government housing is not affordable housing. I repeat that. Government housing does not equal affordable housing. What government housing equals is subsidized housing. And we can't, as a government, build enough of it to solve this crisis. And in the same time, there's a cost to it. And it's a cost where we're playing the middleman. So we're paying government employees to build this housing. So we drain some of that housing fund off to support staff. And at the same time, there's other costs. And we've seen by printing trillions of dollars and increasing the federal budget for all these wonderful things we're happy about now, 2 negative quarters of growth, 10% inflation, and a 6% mortgage market right now. There is a cost to everybody for government supplied housing. With that, the biggest things I think we can work on are removing barriers for the private sector to build affordable housing. True affordable housing is built by the private sector and purchased by private citizens or rented by private citizens. One of the things we can do is support the city of Springfield in their challenge of the DLCD new rules that were put into effect through executive orders, not statute, that are over prescriptive and require too many things and reduce local flexibility and local choice. We need to support the city of Springfield in their efforts. We also need to lobby hard. We're lowering the lot size for ADUs on RR zone land. What's silly is the larger RR zone lots are usually the ones furthest from employment centers, furthest from the real need. The smaller RR lots are in these unincorporated communities that are generally close to other places of employment. Mapleton, for instance, which has its own water and sewer system, so it's not a concern about overloading issues. But there are multiple less than 2 acre RR lots in Mapleton, very close to an area that is desperately in need of workforce housing. And Elmira, another unincorporated community with small RR lots. Yet we can't build ADUs there. That's you can imagine just the amount of front doors we could add just with legalizing ADUs for half acre and up RR lots. That's where I think we can really push some concentration, while at the same time, continuing our efforts with our LMD staff to keep them staffed, at a higher level, so we're not the roadblock. I still constantly hear from builders about delayed inspections or being bounced back through the system. Those sort of things we kind of got to keep working on those issues, which is, one of our stress funds. But if we're really challenged with housing, that's got to be a focus, is to try and make sure we're providing good service at a reasonable price for the permitting we do that we're responsible for. So I appreciate a lot of the strategies, but I think we need to be careful about thinking that somehow or another we're going to build as government our way out of this. I do think there is a real place for some government housing. No one else is going to do the permanently supportive housing that we can do. That is a true function of government, because we are serving a community that can't truly help themselves a lot of times and need that wraparound services and case management to be successful in life. But we're not going to build affordable housing for the entire community. We have to lean on the private sector to do that, and we have to free them every chance we get with trying to eliminate overly prescriptive rules, particularly rules that come from executive orders, extra constitutionally. So I would urge us to support the City of Springfield in their challenge.
Thank you, Commissioner Bozovich. Vice Chair Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. First, thank you, Sarai. Your work on housing is literally and metaphorically foundational for what this organization does moving forward on housing. And you and I first met in 2008. You served on a board of an organization I was the director for, and we've stayed collegial through a number of different community projects and organizations over these last now going on 15 years. And so I know your impact and your influence in the community wherever you land next or whatever you do, and what you have done all of these many years, not only in your time here at Lane County, is a part of what's continuing to move this work forward. So thank you for that. I have a couple of questions. One is just for my own understanding, clarification. The one strategy around the first right refusal and foreclosed properties, is that only for unincorporated areas, or is that something that we're working in partnership with cities to identify? Say a little more about.
Yeah, sure. So the tax foreclosures happen throughout the county, anywhere. And so when that does happen, any of the municipalities where we have those coming through, we can work with and do, different things with, depending on those ordinances and local code and so forth. So yeah, it is something countywide that is available, and certainly an interesting one. We get a lot of sort of random parcels. So there are some that aren't really accessible or useful in that way, but occasionally we do have a few that can be used for housing.
Great, thank you. And sort of similarly, but different, with the limited equity corporations and the partnership with faith organizations, I assume our role in that work would be sort of technical advisory first, and then potentially as a partner, whether with resources or other ways later, should a faith community identify a piece of property that they wanted to move forward on that kind of model. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. One other piece, and this is more for Director Adams, just as a flag, as you may not know, the the item that came up around increasing BIPOC homeownership, that Senator James Manning has a legislative concept that he's working on introducing next session, specifically getting at reducing barriers to homeownership for BIPOC folks. So I wanted to make sure that was on your radar legislatively. And then lastly, I think just sort of to follow up and amplify or expand a little bit on some of the comments Commissioner Bozovich made. You know, when he says it's, you know, not cost effective for government to build housing, I mean, there's a cost to not building housing that often lands on the government's ledger in terms of the services that we end up providing folks who are unhoused or rent burdened and need supports in other ways. So it's all one giant chessboard, and we're just constantly moving the pieces around. And I didn't see, to my read, an over-reliance on government-funded housing in this plan. I see many, many strategies, that being one piece. And I completely agree about the rural ADUs. I think we've talked about that before, and I think that's on our agenda later this month specifically to look at. And that is, of course, out of our hands as a board, but it's not out of our hands to advocate for the changes that we need, because I think we're all in agreement that 2 acres is far too large a parcel size to get at what we really need, and really what the homeowners who want to build the ADUs want, most importantly. But that's really more a land management than our housing implementation plan topic. So I'm looking forward to staff coming back to us with that item and talking about what we can do in the upcoming legislative session, if anything, to address that. So thank you for your time with Lane County, for the foundation that you've laid for us to continue this work. And I'm sure I'll see you around.
Sure. Thank you, Vice Chair. Mr. Adams, Ms. Johnson, thank you very much for the presentation. This is great. The slide deck, I'm sure, is available to us, because I couldn't keep up with all the notes that I wanted to take on that and still listen to what you were saying, because there's a great deal of content there. And there are a couple of things that really stood out to me. But first, the accolade. It's been marvelous working with you. I met you when you had applied for the job, and we had a chance to sit and chat, and I was just thoroughly convinced that you were the right person for the job, and you were the right person for the job at the time. I wish that you'd had an easier plate to handle, because the last 2 years in a job that's dynamic and that is continually affected by outside sources, you performed admirably, but it was so difficult because so many things changed. I don't know how you knew at the end of the day what you were thinking if what you were thinking at the beginning of the day was still accurate, because things were changing so quickly. But as has been pointed out, we had a chance to invest some money in properties locally that would not have happened if not for the fire and for COVID. You know, we were able to do it, and you were steering the ship on that. So you've done a remarkable job, Ms. Johnson, Sarai, during this last couple of years. We've made tremendous progress. There are a couple of things that you talked about today that I'd like to talk about our progress and what may be our future progress. One thing, you kind of saved it for last, is the innovative approach that the county can use to providing housing styles. Now, the innovative approach is something we've talked about, whether it be rural residential ADUs and outside of the urban growth boundaries, or whether it be different types of housing inside the urban growth boundaries, redeveloping a corner lot, for instance, to add more housing in because of recent legislation. But let's talk about the things that prevent our innovation. You know, why are we not more innovative than we actually are? Well, we are subject to rules that are laid down upon us by the federal government, by agencies of the federal government, and also by agencies of the state government that make it difficult for us to do the things that we want to do. We want to provide housing that is affordable to wage earners. That's what we want to provide. Whatever your wage may be, we want to provide housing to do that. And quite often we can't do it because to subsidize housing, we have to abide by rules that make subsidized housing very, very expensive to build units. You know, I was in a meeting with the members of the county commissioners from the coast. We're talking about how difficult it is to provide housing on the coast because of the cost per unit in less resourced counties. Not less resourceful counties, but less resourced counties that don't have as much opportunity to assist in the housing. So how can we do that? And how do we leverage the federal agencies, and how do we best leverage the state agencies to understand that actions that they take that sometimes seem arbitrary, in fact, I truly believe sometimes are arbitrary. Some person at a decimal place checks a box and all of a sudden it's the rule for everybody in the nation. You know, that make it more expensive for us to do exactly what we want to do. How can we best leverage that? Well, at the county, we have we have one of the best lobbyists in the entire state, which is Alex Kylo. We know that. And Alex keeps really good track of how we can move things forward. But Alex can't be alone in it. We have to find ways to, as individuals, to generate support, to make certain that the people at higher levels of government understand that the things that they do make it difficult for you to do your job and for us to make the policy to provide the housing that we want to provide. So yesterday we had a chance to listen to Richard Cho, who is, I think is the, his job is the, it works for HUD.
Senior advisor to
Senior advisor for housing,
Secretary.
senior advisor to the Secretary for Housing. And he spoke very eloquently about HUD's investment, particularly a $2.8 billion investment that was announced this week for housing. But how can we best make that $2.8 billion get to the bottom line and not be filtered in a way that we only get a certain percentage of it to make it affected at the local level? I'm not going to talk about it right here and now, but it's something that we have to be aware of. And also, how do we use our partners, such as Association of Oregon Counties, to help us at the state level to add more punch, add a left jab to our right hook, when we go to the legislature. This week and last week, we had joint meetings of the Health and Human Services and the Public Safety Steering Committees for the state. The first time we've ever really done that, where we begin to talk about de-siloing public safety and Health and Human Services, because everybody here agrees that they're joined at the hip, but we tend to allow them to silo. And how do we talk to the state departments to do that so that they're doing the same thing, so that the Department of Land, what is it called? Department of Land Conservation and what's that last word? Development. Yeah. How do we get them to understand that that they need to be responsive to our needs in terms of addressing housing for the people who are least able to afford it? Commissioner Bozovich is right. There's no such thing as affordable housing because everything costs about the same amount unless government puts more regulations on it. And then our affordable housing is actually less affordable, costs more to make. But what we want is housing that is affordable to the people earning wages, that they can without having income-based housing, which we do provide, and we love income-based housing. We love it. I do. But without providing income-based housing, how can we make housing affordable for the people at every different earning level? Well, that's what you're doing. You've raised the level. You've raised the bar, Sarai, Ms. Johnson, over the time that you've worked here. This presentation today helps us, gives us some footpath that we can trudge down. I know you're not going away. You're going to continue your work after your relaxation, whether it be with the county, wherever it happens to be. But really, your energy, your enthusiasm, and your discussion about innovation is something that we need to carry in our hip pocket as we move forward. And I want to thank you for that. But the last thing I want to ask is this, Mr. Mark. My house, my personal house, is wonderful. It went up about 40% in value. But that's not wonderful, because that means every house in Lane County probably went up 40% in value over the last couple of years. Why did it? Why on earth did it? That's not just a rhetorical question. I'm demanding answers. Why did my house go up so much? Which means that every single person who wants to get their first house is looking at that same elevated cost. Every single person who wants to rent a one-bedroom apartment or a studio is looking at that same elevation in cost. What can we do to help that not happen for the future? Well, I think one thing that we need to do is look at our land supply. Do we have the land it takes to build the houses? A lot of discussion to have on that. And I've not really answered any questions. I've asked a lot of questions, spoken my heart, but the most important thing is you've given us an opportunity with this presentation and with your work over the last couple of years to really make some headway. Commissioner Bernie.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really want to thank Commissioner Trieger, actually, who made a comment that got me thinking, which is, what is the cost of not building housing? It opens up a can of worms. And Ms. Johnson, I just want to say, I think you've been between a rock and a hard place. I think we are between a rock and a hard place. This issue is affecting the country. a couple of the multiple reasons our houses have gone up in value is our government has printed about 40% of the entire money supply in the last decade in the American economy. Another reason is the federal government for the last 40 years has really declined public investment in public housing. Another reason relates to interest rates and a lack of housing production over the last decade adequate for the growing population. The rich, it's not affecting as much in housing prices because guess what? Jumbo loans, Commissioner Bozovich, are not at 6%, they're at 4.4%. Conventional loans are not yet at 6%. They're at about 5.25% as of yesterday with Selco, my bank. Trust me, I'm looking at this stuff. But they're moving up. They're going to be moving up. And so I really commend you for being between a rock and a hard place. This is not a possible answer to be solved in isolation of a broader economy. My son is wanting to move to Portland. He's going to have to sell a house that he couldn't have gotten into if I didn't co-sign for it, right? Because of housing prices. But then he got me off of it. But now they're finding that they can't move to the market they need his job is at, because even though he's going to make a lot of money, Portland is a more expensive housing market than this area. And interest rates have become so much higher since he purchased his house that his monthly obligation would be so much. And so here's an example of someone that is a working person that can't make an upward change because of this crazy housing market. I would say that affordability is not a function of, not just a function of price, it's also a function of wages. And so I'm very proud of the work this county has done, because until we have full employment, until wages are enabling purchasing power of what used to be an American dream, which is owning your own home, et cetera, being able to send your kids to college that are affordable, et cetera. So you're between a rock and a hard place. The cost of not building housing, I think, relates to all of these costs, Commissioner Trieger, that we're dealing with in terms of public safety, in terms of addictions, in terms of all of these issues. It's so intertwined. So Sarai, whatever you do, I hope you continue on a journey that's consistent with what you've done thus far with your life. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Further discussion? In the today's material, it says no new policy issues have been identified for discussion at the 8/02/22 meeting. Really, we are discussing policy issues, because what we're talking about is how do we adjust our policy for the future. No decisions made today, but we really do need to take a look to our policy director at what do we do? How can our policies really make the changes that we're talking about today, help facilitate the recommendations that you've made in this report, Ms. Johnson? So with that, any further discussion to the panel? Ms. Mokrahewski, Mr. Adams, Ms. Johnson, thank you very much. Great presentation.
So
I'll join you with that. Ms. Mokrahewski, do you have any announcements?
Just a couple of things, Chair. I wanted to just make a comment about Commissioner Bozovich brought this up, the public safety funding and staffing in the DA's office. So we've seen some news reports and communications from the district attorney about staffing challenges, and wanted to just assure the board that we are working collaboratively with our district attorney on creative solutions. This is a challenge that we're facing in a number of places for difficult to recruit and retain positions. Certainly our medical staff, some of our frontline public works staff, competition in the market. And we were just talking about housing and what are the challenges with why have prices increased so much? Supply and demand is so much the answer to that question. And the similar is true for our workforce, is that there's heavy demand for skilled labor, and there's competition for for those positions, and it puts a stress certainly on our ability to meet all of those needs. So we have done some creative things in other places around, and thankfully the state has waived some of the requirements related to pay equity to allow for creative use of one-time retention, recruitment and retention bonuses. That's been really effective, a really effective tool for us to be able to utilize for certain classifications that have been really difficult for recruitment and retention. So that is something that we're looking at as it relates to those positions. And I think, again, I'll just say, Commissioner Bozovich's point about the challenge with state funding. And it's not just in the DA's office, but of course, there's an interconnection between the decrease, as the DA files fewer cases and those low-level cases that oftentimes get referred to supervision. That means fewer cases that our parole and probation officers are supervising, which means less reimbursement from an already shrunk pie of resources that the state provides for that area. So that I just wanted to share that to start off on something that, a challenging note that we acknowledge the challenges there, and we'll continue to look at creative options to address staffing needs there. I also wanted to make a comment about our county fair. Commissioner Trieger mentioned the county fair and oftentimes the challenges of we talk about equity a lot, and we're focused on equity in our organization and the need to make sure that we're serving all parts of our community and those who want to visit the fair. We had a great fair, and we had some isolated challenges related to that were reported to us that our staff got on and responded very quickly to, and we were able to address. And I want to just say that we're also doing follow-up work to make sure that we're proactive for future fairs, consistent with the culture of belonging that we continue to invest in this organization that we run, that the events that we also support, that the vendors that we bring on, that the stands that are there that we support, both First Amendment rights, but also a consistency with the culture of belonging and the values that we've established as an organization. So I want to, our county council, our fair staff, and our equity manager are all working together to identify ways in which we can be proactive in that regard in the future and continue to have great county fairs going forward. And then to close on just two positive notes, Commissioner Farr, you mentioned, and you did a great job yesterday at the opening of the Nell on 11th and Charlton. And Commissioner Buck was in attendance as well. It was a great event. 45 new units opened at the Nell. This was a wonderful partnership between Lane County, Homes for Good, City of Eugene, HUD, the state. We did have a senior representative from HUD that was there. We had the executive director of the Oregon Housing and Community Services Agency. Just another great project. And then on Monday, invite all of you. Hopefully you'll be available on Monday. I'm just going to check the time. August 8th. At 10 a.m. at 100 River Avenue, we will be opening our Shelter and Navigation Center, and we're really excited to do that work. Again, a great partnership between Lane County, the City of Eugene, and various community partners in that effort. So the last comment I'll make, and something that we'll talk about next Monday related to these projects, when we talk about housing, you all talked a lot about affordable housing, the challenges with affordable housing. We're launching truly government subsidized permanent supportive housing that is government built housing that is expensive, but it is a piece of the puzzle. And then a shelter and navigation center. We don't have a low barrier public shelter and navigation center in Lane County. We oftentimes talk about these things in isolation. If you go back to that TAC report, that it was all about the connection between these things, that we have to do affordable housing, workforce housing, we have to do public subsidized permanent supportive housing. We have to have a shelter navigation center. We need to have a behavioral crisis and stabilization center. All of these are pieces of the system that as we build all of that out, the puzzle becomes complete. And so just a reminder that they all interact together, and investing in all pieces of that is really critical. That's all I have, Chair, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you, Ms. Mroczkowski. Any questions for Ms. Mroczkowski? Any comments? Commissioner Buck.
I'll just share regarding the fair. Our family had a fabulous time. I have to give big kudos out to Search and Rescue, who were very present throughout the entire fair. It felt very safe. And they were giving out 1 million stickers to all the kids. It was really well done. And I also really want to thank our staff who was on top of it when certain things came up that we needed to take care of. They did an excellent job at responding, both in person and in writing, to any issues that came up. There's always room for improvement, as it's been said today. And I look forward to seeing how we evolve in some areas of the fair. But overall, I thought it was fantastic. So just wanted to share my thanks to the crew and staff.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Buck. Commissioner Buck and I hung out in kind of the same places because we had kids about the same age who demand where you go at the fair. And so we spent a lot of time in the same places, and it really was, the kids carnival was just an amazing place to be.
Yeah, and just, we're kind of, for those that might be watching this, I mean, I appreciate that comment, Commissioner Buck, because we really had, to my knowledge, like 2 isolated incidents. One was a vendor that was part of the carnival that had some really offensive prizes that were being offered there. Those were called to our attention. We worked with that vendor, and they, to my understanding, quickly removed those prizes. And that's something that we just want to pay more attention to in the future and understand, so that we're in front of that and make it really clear, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable at our county fair. The other was related to, and that was a vendor, someone that, we contract with the carnival. So we had more control there. In other places, we allow people to pay for booths. And so that's a little bit different. And there's some First Amendment related issues around speech that come into play there. And there were concerns brought to our attention about information being shared at one of those booths that was concerning, and on a number of levels. And so that one has a little bit more nuance to it. So yes, it was an incredible fair. It was all, a great crowd. People had a great time. 2 incidences that we worked and we continue to work through to make sure that we get in front of those things in the future. So for context, I think it's important to acknowledge that, and to call out those things and understand, hey, we know this is an issue, and we're going to get active and proactive to make sure that those types of issues are not a concern for future fairs. So thanks.
Right on. And I'm going to point out, Ms. Morgan, that on Monday, the day after the fair, I went down there and I got to spend time in what I believe is the true heart and soul of a county fair. I was in the canning booth, breaking down the canning exhibit and helping distribute the prizes to the people who win prizes. And I'll tell you, when you see those people who come in who can, pickled seaweed, and they won the 2nd prize for pickled seaweed, it's pretty enheartening to know that people are that enthusiastic at that level about the county fair. The carnival rides are great, and the games are great, and all of the music is good. But really, when you see the people who spent their time canning seaweed, just picking seaweed out of the air, all the things that they do, and they come in and they're so proud of the red ribbon that they won, or in some cases the purple ribbon that they won. And I had a chance to meet the fair champion. The champion of all the fair happened to be in the canning booth, because a lot of the things that she did is canning, and to see her just so, there are no words that can describe how the people who exhibited the fair are really the heart and soul. That's why we have the fair, and everything else is a bit of an adjunct. So, anything else, Commissioner Bozievich?
Just want to say, my real appreciation for the fair is that family environment, and so much of the entertainment's changed over the years. There was a day and the age when the county fair was kind of not thought of as a family environment. It ages back, a couple decades ago. I do have a little bit of concern though about some of our entertainment choice in this particular fair that wasn't necessarily family friendly. And I think we received some complaints about that also, that we need to kind of be forward-thinking some of that. Music that uses expletive lyrics, et cetera, might be thought out a little bit better, especially, highly amplified. So the neighborhood doesn't have a choice whether they, their kids have to be explained why that music's being played. So just saying, that's another issue we should be paying attention to.
But I gotta say that some of the music was that's the way, I liked it.
Boomer.
Yeah, don't date yourself.
I'm red-faced now. Very good. And then we'll move directly along. I'm going to skip executive session because I'll be reading it into executive session at the conclusion of the morning's business. And we'll move along to commissioners' business. Any announcements from the Board of Commissioners or future board assignments? Let's wrap it all together. Commissioner Trieger.
Thank you, Chair. It has come to my attention, there are a couple of vacancies coming up on our planning commission, and we need 2 commissioners assigned to interview applicants. And it's my understanding we can do this through head nods, and that historically we try to have a balance of a metro area and a rural commissioner to do the review of applicants and interview with staff support. So I would like to ask for head nods to this board to see if it's all right with folks for Commissioner Buck as our rural representative who will be serving a term that encompasses when our new planning commissioners are doing work with Lane County. And I would be happy to be the Metro Representative Commissioner on that interview panel. I'm assuming Chair Farr would be happy to fill that, but I'll just put forward first for head nods. And if we receive them, then we're done for Commissioner Buck and I to be the interviewers for planning commission applicants.
I have to correct something. It's been traditional. It's been the 2 rural commissioners that sit on that interview committee.
Thank you.
Because 90% of what the planning commission deals with is outside urban growth boundaries.
Thank you for that.
Just saying.
You're right. I stand corrected, and I do recall actually having this very conversation, and am now remembering the reason I was interviewing planning commission applicants was because there was not agreement, and we were down to 1 seat, and something I did very new as a commissioner was that interview. So disregard the comment about the tradition and the history, and say having commissioners who will be serving when these new planning commissioners are doing their work for the county. And also I'm just offering myself up as a volunteer to contribute an interview along with Commissioner Buck. So looking for head nods.
Any objections to that recommendation by Commissioner Buck? By Commissioner Vice Chair Tree, excuse me. And I've heard Commissioner Bozovich's suggestion there, and I'm in favor of this particular suggestion. Then Mr. Mocker, I see that we'll do that as a head nod type assignment. Further announcements or future board assignment requests? I just have one little old thing. I love U of O football. I really do. I know you like Wisconsin football. Every now and then they meet, but every now and then we get a all-star in our audience. And I'd like to point out that Andy Vibora, man, when I was in college and shortly after, you were the star on the field, Andy Vibora. I loved watching Andy Vibora play linebacker for the U of O Ducks. So a salute to you. Then without further items to announce or future board assignments, Ms. Mokrasi, do you have any assignments that you can report?
So that was an assignment that was just made?
Sounded like it, yeah. Yes, to the interview committee for the planning commission would consist of Commissioners Buck and Vice Chair Trieger.
Buck and Trigger, okay. So that, I have that assignment.
Very good. Any corrections, adjustments? At this point, then, Ms. Markowski, I'm going to read us into executive session. We'll, at the gavel, we will recess the Board of County Commissioners regular meeting, and I'll read us into executive session. At the conclusion of the executive session, which will begin at 1:30 remote today, we may or may not come out into regular session. All likelihood, we will not come back into regular session. So with that, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to carry on labor negotiations and to consult with counsel regarding the rights and duties of the public body with regard to current litigation. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602D and H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made during executive session. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. The sound of my gavel will be recessed and reconvene in remote session at 1:30 p.m.